Hey, good evening, everybody. My name's Claire Rennie. I am the unemployable counselor, and just making sure we're all ready and on. One thing on this channel I like to do is obviously I'm a counselor. I talk about it. I talk about different things, but I've never actually specifically talked about addiction. I mean, like addiction. I'm not talking about you just like something a lot. I'm talking about it preoccupies your thinking, interferes with your daily life, isolates you, cancels your relationships, and you think they're just being difficult. That kind of addiction. Now, honestly, I come from, 20 years ago when I got in the field, I was really all, harm reduction seemed like, the way to go. And it has its place, but I think it can be utilized with other things to make things better. And I don't know what the state of that is or anything like that. And I'm not commenting on any services or anything like that. I would just want to be clear about that. I'm just a guy talking about his view of addiction and how I look at it, number one, and not even we'll get into that. But what I'm saying is that it's everyone has a different viewpoint about this, right? You can have a medical viewpoint where you think it can be treated with addiction or with medication, which is another branch of that of the tree. But there's the holistic approach. You got folks that do harm reduction where it's we'll lessen the risk. We'll try to help you better take care of yourself now with the hopes that you will learn from this and be able to do it on your own and thus do others and, the tree of life, right? Or, there's a lot of different viewpoints, I have to say. And I mean, I think that all of them have a lot of validity to them, right? Whether you think it's a change issue, right? It's just no, it's your choice. You want to be this way, you should just quit, right? That's, those are big. The genetic factors, people think, is it hereditary? Is it hereditary? Is there something in your genes that makes people more susceptible to alcohol and drug use than anybody else? Valid points. But I'm thinking that if you take all those viewpoints and put them together, right, there is some commonalities, but the main thing should be the ending, because it should all end at the same place, because it doesn't matter what I believe personally about addiction. It matters what the client thinks and what the client believes, and I have to be able to work within that. If I can't, then I don't think I'm being a very good counselor, because I'm not putting their view in front of my own. Right? Don't even get me started on codependency, although I did do a video on it. Right? But when it comes to addiction, I look at it that way, right? It's where they are, where they're at, right? They need to be a part of the process. You and I could sit down together and I could make you a fantastic plan that's comprehensive, that's just beautiful, right? Children will be crying, there'll be songs written about it, but it probably won't work because it's not your plan, it would be mine. It would work for me, right? But it wouldn't work for you. So it has to be your plan, stuff a person can do, right? I feel like I'm all over the map here, but I'm going to talk about this, right? So addiction is that preoccupation with anything, and it can be anything. I'm not talking about that show Intervention where a guy's addicted to eating his couch or that kind of stuff, because there is extreme cases like that, and there's a lot of fundamentals in play that are the same across the board. But number one, I don't want to talk about that. So we're going to focus on the addiction to alcohol and drugs. And that also includes prescription drugs, for those keeping track at home. So what it is you don't start anything in life, right? You don't start doing anything if you don't get something out of it at the beginning, right? Now, there's a whole lot of factors. There's a whole lot of things. If you grew up in an environment where there's always beer or it's always full of wine bottles, right? Or you're always going outside having hoots or whatever the case may be, it almost normalizes that for that youth growing up, right? You think about the environmental factors, the family of origin, you throw in trauma, you throw in, dysfunction, you throw in those pieces, and yeah, you could see where the coping strategy of trying to use something to forget or get through those times would be higher than most, than households that don't have those types of concerns, Not saying there's not issues, but concerns are different, and motivational factors to get people to use are all classified under the same umbrella with stuff like physical trauma or sexual trauma, whatever the case may be. But it's all things that happen to you that shapes your frame, where you need something to go to escape, to get through whatever it is you're going through. That's kind of the way I look at it with that factor, right? And I think that's. And if I think I'm wrong, put it in the comments, man. I'm not a psychologist. I'm just a counselor, right? But I mean, you start thinking about things like that, and it gets to be like, okay, if you're going to work with someone like that, where do you need to go? So if they're mired in their addiction due to trauma and things of that nature, there's certain ways you have to do that. And like trauma-informed care is a big phrase thrown around a lot, but it holds a lot of meaning, and more places shouldn't engage in it. That's my own personal opinion, right? But you look at, there's the abstinence. After that, it goes down the list. But anyways, right, you got all these different types of medical model where, I can treat you with medication, right? I always think, even though it's harm reduction, I always think methadone. Methadone is a synthetic opioid that basically, helps you function in society because it gives you the opioid that your body's craving without that euphoric or that high that follows it, right? Because eventually in addiction, you're going so far that if you quit using the drugs, number one, it's going to hurt. And it's probably going to be bad if you've been using it for a long time. Methadone will give you that, but allow you to, start to function in society and start to, be able to just live like a normal life without that high in addiction. And it kind of cuts that piece out. That's the harm reduction piece, right? And I think it has a place. But I think something like that needs to have counseling involved with it. Because depending on your point of view about it, whatever, I think that anything that you're on for something like that is an addiction base, as you're treating with a medication, if you don't have the component of counseling or some therapeutic alliance with it, it's going to fail. Because it's more than just the pill. And that's the only issue I have with the medical model. I mean, if I got hit by a truck, I definitely would want them doing what they need to do, and I'd probably ask for morphine, right? But I'm just saying, when you look at it through that lens of, okay, like what are we treating here? Are we treating the immediate need, right? But then there's a long-term need, because your body still is fostering a dependence, and at some point, if you come off of it, you would need to be weaned off, and that's a process that could take probably years, right? Depending on how high your dose is and how fast they can knock that down. Interesting things like that, but for the ordinary guy who's just, has stressors and all those sorts of things, and he uses other things to cope, whether it's alcohol or pot or whatever, right? It's whatever it is to kind of get them through those places. And, there's recreational use, and then there's use that starts going beyond recreational, and then there's use that becomes a full-time job, and that's just to get out of bed. You got to have what you're doing. You got to have a stiff one in the morning. I'm talking drink, right? Or, I'll just have a quick hoot before I go out the door, just, to kind of sharpen the senses, whatever. Or doing a line in the bathroom at lunch, or whatever the case may be. Those things happen as it progresses, and you start to do things that you would normally think that's just crazy. Who in their right minds would do that? And you're doing that, right? That's how that happens, and it builds up and it goes quick. Well, when it would take you maybe 4 drinks to get drunk, now all of a sudden it's 8, then it's up to 12. Then there'll come a day where it's back down to you're drinking 2 and you're already half cut. And why is that? That's not because your body's decided, hey, that's because your body's getting in the last stages of addiction where it's going like, I can't do that. I can't prop this up anymore, man. Your body's starting to systematically shut down. And then when you pass out, it's only a step away from death, right? We've all been to parties or someone passes out and they piss themselves, or somebody poops themselves, unfortunately, right? And everyone's all laughing and drawing on their faces. Yeah, you know what? Their body is trying to expel whatever they put into it because it's not supposed to be there and it's harming them, so it's expelling it every way possible, right? I wonder how many dead people have been found with penises drawn on their forehead at some of these parties, because that's exactly what that leads to, right? Interesting. It's been a bounce conversation, but I just had a few things I wanted to think about with addiction. I've been thinking about a lot lately because I really enjoy the process of people kind of moving through that continuum, right? Of when they, you know, you see them and it's rough, but then as they make the changes themselves, like I said, like no one, you go to a counselor not because a counselor will save them, because no, counselors don't save anybody, in my opinion. What we do is we help you save yourself, right? I always described it as like, hey man, if we're on a road trip, you might be driving, but I might have a map and point out some good turns, right? But you're still driving behind, you're still behind the wheel, you're still driving. I can't make you come to the park. And if I'm working harder than you, then I'm going to stop working. Because if you want to, you know, because addiction counselors are only human, right? And and you got to be careful if you start saying I did this if you're a counselor, but because it should be about the client. That's where you start. It's a client-centered approach, right? You know, you say you needed like 3 things to work in a place. You need to be professional, be accountable, and be client-focused. Because that's how you get ahead, and that's how you have an honest approach. And even if it doesn't work out for the client and they relapse, whatever, when they come back to see you, they're going to come back to see you probably because, number one, you're upfront and honest with them and explained it. I mean, it's about them. You know, they make their own successes. But when a person's addicted, they don't see that because they're busy pushing everyone away, thinking why they're being assholes, and then they're, you know, all of a sudden they have, you know, they realize there's no one around, but it's not their fault. But the booze is always there, or the drugs are always there, right? That gets to be the lover, the friend, the secret admirer, the crush, everything all in one. So, I mean, addiction is a complicated issue. A lot more complicated than people think, Chris, is just quit. Can't just quit. If you just quit, it could mean death, right? People have, you know, died for lesser things. So, I mean, that's what I mean. Like, there has to, you know, and I mean, now the big talk is about the mandated treatment. I'm for it. So I think there's some people that have reached the ability where they just can't care for themselves. And I'm thinking like the hardcore drug addicts. You know, you'll see, you know, everyone talks about, oh, homelessness, you know, it needs to do something. A bulk of that is mental health and addictions. So, I mean, if there was an issue, or a way to get people to go to treatment, addictions treatment, right, where they had to stay just similar to a jail sentence, because they get picked up and they get put in jail. Yeah, they might be sober, but they're not actively working on any sort of addiction issue, right? And even if they get mandated a treatment, they can still be like, screw this, I'm not doing it. That's still their prerogative. But they're going to be there for that because of what they've been doing to themselves and society as a whole, right? And I'm not saying round up people with a giant net, throw them in a truck and drive them down. What I'm saying is if you're seeing the same people drunk, get in a dangerous position, or, you know, circumstances, situations. We've all driven around our cities and kind of seen people where it's like, oh man, or I keep seeing that guy, or it's 40 below out. If they can get them in the treatment where they're fed, they have a chance to get better, they get their medical needs met, all that sorts of stuff. Even if they go back to that lifestyle, it's probably prolonged the life of that individual. Now, I know anyone who wants to talk human rights can throw it in the comments because, you know, I'm a big fan of human rights. Everyone should have the right to choose. But I think it's almost like if you look at mental health conditions where people will go into, you know, psychotic rages or something to that effect where they might not be responsible for their actions. Same thing happens with addictions when people have blackouts or become violent because of the crystal meth, things like that, right? I think as a whole, I think we're trying to look at how do we care about that, you know, marginalized part of the population, you know, and it's sometimes when people are in that bad of the state of their addiction or mental health, they can't choose for themselves the right course of action to take. So while it might be, you know, people laugh or make fun of homeless, whatever, it's like, man, these people are not, you know, a lot of them aren't well. A lot of them are struggling. A lot of them have trauma, all that kind of stuff, right? And it leads to addiction. And addiction is a huge part. I bet you talk to a lot of homeless folks and they're going to tell you that addiction is probably one of the number one reasons why they're there. So if there is a way to get people into treatment and give them a shot at getting better if they so choose at that moment, then how can we not, take that? And I mean, this kind of went a bit far-reaching conversation about addiction tonight, but I just had some ideas and thoughts that, I think two things can be right, and I mean, I think with all the different theories and all the different philosophies around how to treat addiction, I think the end results have to be the same, evidence-based practice, right? And then it's like you work with them where they're at to get where they need to go. And it's not like an auto part line, right? Like there's variables here because they're humans and things happen. And you can't do everything in like 6 sessions or whatever. You have to be flexible to the needs of the client for it to work. You can put a blanket on it, but that blanket should still keep everybody warm as opposed to just be on top of their heads, right? All right. I'm going to go because I think I've taken up too much of your time. If you've watched this far, thank you. And follow and share. This is I'm going to do more chats on addiction. So I'm hoping I get questions about it because I would like to. I think we could talk more about some of that stuff. But anyways, have a great night. Unemployable counselor, Mando, me, and the rooster. All right, take care.